This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Grant and Joe Hoyt. Fellas, we're meeting a day after the Cowboys' big win over the Raiders. And Joe and I were talking about before the podcast started. We figured the Cowboys would beat the Raiders. They're not very good, and they didn't look very good last night. Once CeeDee Lamb got back into the game, and that changed things a little bit. They looked a lot better. So, first of all, do we know why the starting wide receivers didn't start the game, Joe?
Yeah, the official word right now is that they missed things, quote unquote, as things. Whatever that means. The fact that they were both together, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, and not on the field for that opening drive suggests that they were both missing something together. But we still don't have a lot of details on that. I will say earlier in the week, I saw a long conversation between Brian Schottenheimer and George Pickens in the warm-up line. And that's something, Schotty is saying hi to literally every player. He spent about 4 or 5 minutes having kind of a interesting conversation with Pickens in the warm-up line, and it kind of perked to the ears of a lot of people. So the fact that happened made me wondering about the timing of things. For what it's worth, Schottenheimer said that they were told that they were going to be missing the first series, on Monday, on game day.
Oh, really? Okay.
So that was a little bit of a surprise, but all's well that ends well, I guess, with how well they played after that.
There was some chatter on Twitter, which, as we all know, is the place where we go for actual facts, that they may have missed curfew on Sunday night. I don't have any verification of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt something like it. It doesn't seem to be anything worse than that, but kudos to Shotty for making a statement, running those guys, sitting those guys on the bench for the first series. And then, of course, the offense looks terrible while they're sitting. And then as soon as they come back in the game, it's just, the party's on. George Pickens continues to be a monster on offense. CeeDee Lamb's terrific, right? We know that, and he's one of the best receivers in the game. But George Pickens didn't come close to playing like this for the Steelers. I mean, he had his moments where he was effective, but he's just a dominant wide receiver. He's so big, he's so athletic. The touchdown catch and run, that he made, he just made the Raiders look silly on that play. It's like a man among boys. I think, I don't want to get carried away here, but I think he already ranks among the biggest talents at wide receiver the Cowboys have had in the Jerry Jones tenure, in my estimation. I think he's terrific.
Yeah, consider this fact that he has the most receiving yards by any Cowboys receiver in the first 10 games of their career with the Cowboys than any other receiver that it's ever been. So I think that there's never been a question about the talent with George Pickens. There's questions about kind of obviously the demeanor, the off the field stuff, but then you kind of talk to him and you really feel the frustration he had with play calling and the way he was used in Pittsburgh too. They sent him on deep balls all the time. And I think that he was getting frustrated thinking that people thought he was only a deep ball type receiver. Here with the Dallas, they've been even surprised by how good his yards after catch ability is and his ability to run. He calls himself Mr. Fantastic, in his ability to kind of stretch and do things. And I think you saw some of that contortion last night in the way that he was breaking tackles. And that was a full George Pickens performance with CeeDee Lamb there too. They're going to have to consider opening up the checkbook and building around these two.
Listen, two things on last night about them. I thought that the minute they got in the game until the end, they played really hard, right? Whatever the punishment was, whatever the infraction was, I think they responded really well to it. Didn't mope, didn't do anything. They came in the game and they played hard and made big contributions. I don't think it was a great look for them to be sitting on the sidelines for that first series, just because of all the things the Cowboys have gone through. But I thought they responded really well. And it led to somebody asking me this question last night: bigger impact on games this season, Micah Parsons or George Pickens?
Oh, I don't know. Micah Parsons is leading one of the NFL's best defenses, and he's the number one ranked edge rusher in the game. I think that I don't know if I want it's possible that you can have both making an equal contribution. But I do just think that he gives them a different dynamic. He just changes everything on the field. You saw what happened between the time that they were not on the field and the time they got on the field. It was two different games and made Dak look completely different. I mean, just everything about it was better. So I do want to say this though. What's up with the jumping on the goalpost? I mean, Jameson Williams got a penalty for that in the Lions game, and then George is doing that too. I mean, what's up with that? What is that supposed to mean anyway?
It's like 6-7.
6-7, yeah, right.
Oh, I'm supposed to do the hand thing, right?
Yeah, you go up and down like that. Yeah, it's not supposed to be
7.
understood. It's supposed to just be kind of known, you know. So, no, and we even asked him after the game. Someone asked him like, "What was up with that?" Or you were trying to tackle the goalpost, I think is the way Nick Harris phrased it. And George was like, "Yeah, I don't even know why I did that." So I mean, it is quintessential George Pickens experience, you know, to be not only fantastic, to miss the opening series because of a disciplinary issue, and also have an unsportsmanlike during the game for a celebration he didn't even know he was going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, he just seems like he's a big kid is what it is. And that was the issue in Pittsburgh. But, so far the Cowboys have seemed to be handling it the right way. And that was certainly the right thing to do for the head coach to make that disciplinary move there. So all's well that ends well. Of course, it's a lot easier to do that against the Raiders than it would have been against, say, the Eagles or the Packers. I'm not saying that he wouldn't have done the same thing then. But we're kind of burying the lead here because the real story last night was not so much those guys, because they've been playing pretty well all year long, is that the defense played so well. That's the best Cowboys defense we've seen this season, and maybe, I don't know, in a couple of seasons. Now, the Raiders aren't very good. We know that. Geno Smith is not having a great year at quarterback. They don't have much of an offensive line. That line is so bad it makes Ashton Jeanty look, routine or just a kind of average running back. And we know that Genty's much better than that. So they're not very good. And having said all of that, that defensive line mauled the Raiders last night. And Joe and I were also talking about this before the podcast started. I can't remember a time when the defensive tackles, let's just leave the ends out of the equation. I can't remember a time that the tackles for the Cowboys just took control of the game like that.
No, it was absolutely fantastic. And then, if you don't mind, I'd kind of like to steer this because I think Evan's the one that has to be the one that has to talk about this, because he's been kind of negative every time I come on here about this Cowboys defense and how bad they are. And I'm just curious, Evan, objectively, what are your thoughts on how they played? Is this an illusion? Is kind of one of the stories I wrote. Was it a magic act?
They played a great game. And listen, everything that they needed to do, they did. I thought they handled from pregame through the end of the game, all the Marshawn Nealon stuff perfectly. I thought that Dak was really eloquent with his teammates. I thought he was really, really eloquent after the game. I think that goes for everybody. Obviously, they were playing on a lot of emotion, and I thought the messages that both Dak and Solomon Thomas gave their teammates were really good direction. I think the teammates followed that. They got, what did they have, 4 sacks last night? They had 4 sacks, I think.
I think that's right.
And they got, I think, 11 quarterback hits. They obviously got to Geno Smith. And yeah, the qualifier is that the Raiders are as bad an offensive team as the Jets, despite having better weapons. But their line play is so bad but you can't do anything about that. You can only play the opponent that you play. And for this to be the first effort with Quinnen Williams, who obviously had a big impact, for the Cowboys to come up big with the number of hits and sacks that they had and tackles for losses, you can only build confidence. They've got an uphill battle. There's no doubt they've got an uphill battle. And I'm still not convinced that this Cowboy defense is a new look and is everything is fixed, and they'll obviously get a little bit better of a test on Sunday against Philadelphia. But you can't go into this game and look at it and say the takeaways were anything other than exceptionally positive to this point, Joe, right? Odighizuwa had his best game of the season, right? Deron
100%.
Bland had a big comeback game after a really poor performance against Arizona. Guys rebounded, and so guys had positive contributions and impacted the game in a positive way, and that only bodes well.
So
Yeah,
Joe,
go ahead,
so Joe,
Kevin.
let's talk. I want you to talk about that with the defensive tackles and what you see for those three guys: Kenny Carter, Quinnen Williams, and Osa Odighizuwa. That's a lot of money tied up in three tackles, right? And so, how are they going to balance all this? What do you expect them to do? How do you expect them to play them going forward? There was some speculation on the broadcast last night. There might be times against the Eagles because of their running game that you might want to play all three at once. So give us an idea of what you think is going to happen there.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing that happened in terms of this defensive line was actually kind of easing the path for an addition of Quinnen Williams. And Arizona was a bad game, right? That was obvious. Deron Bland, as Evan pointed out, had his worst game in a long time. But one thing they did in Arizona was on first and second down, they went to 5-man fronts and they had success with it. They had five guys going up against five offensive linemen. So what does that mean? One-on-ones everywhere. And if you choose to double team someone, then that's what you're going to do, but it's going to take away from other things. And I think when you added Quinnen Williams, you added the ability to have a 5-down front, which means your 5 best players, I think, on your defensive line are all together at once. They have found something with Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney is looking like their best edge rusher. Donovan Ezuraku has stepped up. And then when you can have those guys on the edge, you can have Quinnen Williams, Kenny Clark, and Osa Odighizuwa down in the middle. That means that there's a lot of one-on-ones and a lot of chances for guys who are better than average players to go make plays against one-on-one competition. That's where Osa Odighizuwa, for example, he had his best game of the season by far. And that's where he's always thrived in his career, is taking advantage of one-on-ones with his ability to not only be stout with how strong he is, but with his quickness. And I think you saw that again last night. And then Kenny Clark, I thought, he kind of found his way back into more of a familiar position for him, a little bit more on the outside that allowed Quinnen to be in the middle. Yeah, I asked Quinnen Williams this after the game, and I said people in Dallas look at you as the key to this, the difference, the final piece of a defensive line that they've been trying to build elusively for a long time and have now invested a lot of resources in this year. And he's like, no, I don't look at it that way. It's a team game. But the thing I would counter Quinnen with is, yeah, it's a team game, and you're making the rest of the team allowed them to be their best selves. And I think that's one thing I'm watching it for, especially against an Eagles team that likes to run the ball, and you're going to have your tush pushes, and Jalen Hurts is going to be on the move. This is going to be the best Cowboys defensive front they've had against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles in quite some time from a totality perspective. I think there's a lot of optimism about the Cowboys finally finding their white whale in terms of building a run-stopping defensive line based on what Quinnen Williams did last night.
Wow, I don't know if he wants to be referred to as the white whale, but that's all right. That might work. Maybe that will. We'll see. Yeah, this is different, and because they were getting some pressure, and obviously most of that pressure was interior pressure. It was not coming so much from the edge, because they were getting so much of that. That made the secondary look a lot better too. So that had a lot to do with the fact that they're reacting to the ball better, and you're getting guys. They're not having to just be out there in space, forever. And so talk about that a little bit, Joe, and exactly what it did for the secondary, the fact that they were getting so much pressure.
Yeah, Deron Bland had multiple pass breakups for the first time this season, I believe. And he looked like a guy that was back into his old timing. I mean, the thing about the Raiders, too, is that's a team that wanted to get the ball out quick, right? And they still had struggles doing that because of the pass rush from the interior specifically. I think, if the corners are able to kind of time things up, it gives them a lot more freedom to kind of just have one path, right? If you're covering a guy, especially in soft zone coverage, and you're on your heels, it's harder to be, more decisive with your breaks. It's harder. You're thinking a lot more. You have to cover longer. When you're able to kind of key up your breaks with defensive lines, timing, and getting after the quarterback, I think it opens up a lot of possibilities for pass breakups and interceptions. I think Deron Bland specifically, and I kind of pointed this out with Osa Odighizuwa. He was at his best when he was able to get one-on-one matchups, right? Well, Deron Bland's been at his best when he's able to have timed up pass rush and he's able to break on balls and be advantageous. And I think you saw that again last night. I think Quinnen Williams, just to go back to that, has been such an important add because it allows some of these guys to be back in their lanes and things that they did successfully rather than trying to be something they're not. And, the other thing I think I'm watching, Caitlin Carson was the only defender on that team last night that played every snap. Kalen Carson, a guy that didn't play much. Some people wrote off kind of going into the season. Kalen Carson had a really good game. Savone Revel, when he was asked to be in press command, and he had one holding, I know, but when he was asked to be in press man, which kind of lends itself to something you can do with a pass rush like this from the interior, he looked good. I'm curious to see what this means for their secondary moving forward, and if they have some better or newer combinations, with Kalen Carson, Savone Revel more involved.
Well, you had a couple of the safeties back too. Malik Hooker was back, right? So that made a little difference, I'm sure, in back there. I wondered how much difference did it make with Logan Wilson in there? They also speculated about this on the broadcast as to, will he be calling defenses or is he there? I mean, he's not. He lost his job in Cincinnati to a rookie, which is not good. I hadn't seen him play much. Watching him last night, one of the times when Geno Wilson took off, he sure wasn't going to catch him. So he's not fast. But they felt like that he was really being brought in for his leadership. I'm wondering if you get any idea at all about the impact or what they expect the impact of Logan Wilson to be.
It's a good question because I think ultimately they're hoping he could be the green dot guy. But last night you saw a heavy rotation of linebackers. By the end of the first quarter, all 5 linebackers had played. They were constantly rotating guys. And, whether it was Maris Liufau, DeMarvion Overshown, Shamar James, Kenneth Murray, and Logan Wilson, I'm just curious to see if this was exploratory by them or if that's something they want to do in terms of having a rotation, keeping guys fresh, doing it more matchup based or personnel based. I think Logan played okay last night. I didn't think anything spectacular. Kenneth Murray had a tip that ended up leading to an interception, though he struggled on some other zone coverage things, especially in the first quarter with some of the play action that Vegas was having success on. But I think moving forward, the linebackers, that is something I'm curious to see is did they see enough from Logan Wilson to make him the full-time green dot starting linebacker to pair with the DeMarvion Overshown perhaps? Or are they liking a rotation where they can kind of keep guys fresh and make it more personnel package based?
Yeah, that'll be interesting because to me, that was as much as we've talked about the defensive line and the tackles and the fact that there's not much pressure coming from the edges. The linebackers were worse, So that was the upgrade at defensive line was a lot bigger than it was at linebacker with those 2 trades. But that's okay. You're not going to hit a home run every time. The Cowboys at least are making some moves, and we'll see how that translates to this Sunday against the Eagles. The Eagles have struggled some on offense this year, and the feeling is that Jalen Hurts is much better when he's running the ball. And I would always say that. How could that not be the case? He's not a great passer. He's an efficient passer, but that's all predicated on what he does to keep a defense loose when it's always worrying about where he's going to go. I always felt like that the best job for Micah Parsons against the Eagles was to be a spy on Jalen Hurts, frankly, because it's like this is, to me, that's their number one offensive weapon is him taking off, right? How many times do we see him do that on big plays, when they really needed something on a third or even a fourth down? It's him taking off. And it wasn't like he was always making some great run. It's just things were wide open. They had it spread out so much that when he took off, he's going to pick up big yards. So that'll be a real key for the Cowboys this week, going up against them. I'm still gonna go with the Eagles, but I may make my pick a little closer than I would have before last night. So who have we got against the Eagles and Cowboys? Who have we got? Evan, we'll start with you. Evan, you're still on mute.
Yeah, I guess I'm still the non-believer on this. I've got to pick the Eagles here. Would love to be wrong on this, but I think the Eagles win. We're going to say by 7. I don't know how high a scoring game it'll be. Let's go 35-28 just for kicks. But this Cowboys defense could turn this around. If this defense is for real, it could make all the difference in the world, because the Eagles certainly haven't played all that great on offense of late. So I'd like to see what happens.
Joe?
I'm open now to picking the Cowboys. I think I'll say I'm not there 100% yet, but you start to look at some of the things that the Eagles have struggled on. They haven't been running the ball that great, to be honest. AJ Brown was kind of force fed a lot of targets, but he was disgruntled for a while, and Jalen Hurts has been okay, and their defense has been really good. I think that's one thing that kind of gets lost in the Eagles conversation, is how good their defense has been. I'm expecting, I think, a defensive battle in this one. And I think if the Cowboys can keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket, and if they can generate interior pass rush like they did against the Raiders, I think that there's an opportunity for the Cowboys to win this game. I think that it's going to be, I think one thing I'm kind of curious is to see who matches up with AJ Brown. That was something that I think Trayvon Diggs did a lot of early in week one. Um, I kind of wonder if Savone Revel is going to be the guy, to be honest with you. And that would be a huge, huge challenge for a rookie making only his second game debut after tearing his ACL. But I think his skill set matches up well with a guy like AJ Brown, and I'm fascinated to see if they're willing to put him in that fire right away.
Well, he's a big guy, a Rebel is, and so that would make a big difference when you're trying to calculate that kind of thing. I'll have to say, the funny thing about all this is that the Cowboys built their team and had been building it for years on their offensive line, and that was how they were going to counteract the Eagles' big defensive front. Was that, well, we're going to match that with our great offensive line. Well, that hasn't really worked out that way, and so it's like the Cowboys are just remaking their team on the fly here, by acquiring these defensive tackles and getting rid of Micah Parsons. And I'm not going to give Jerry Jones credit for anything yet and say that this was okay that he traded Micah Parsons and this is how it ended up. Let's sit back and see how it all works out, and let's see how it works out in the long run, and whether guys, how long they remain in their prime, because this is just like the Luka Doncic trade. Even if it had worked out well with Anthony Davis, he's a lot older, and certainly Quinnen Williams is not a lot older than Micah Parsons is, but the shelf life on defensive tackles isn't as long as it is on defensive ends. So we'll see how that all works out. But Joe, we appreciate you coming on with us. We know you got to get going here. They're going to have a press conference here in just a minute with Brian Schottenheimer. So thanks for coming on, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. All right, Evan, give us an update on where the Rangers are.
They are and remain in Arlington.
Thank you.
As far as where they are on moves, there's not a whole lot to update. They Friday they kind of have to set the roster ahead of the winter meetings, and that means they've got to tender contracts to their arbitration guys. The two biggest decisions, and I don't think they're really tough decisions. I don't expect the Rangers to tender contracts to Adolis Garcia, who would be due over $10 million in ARB, or Jonah Heim, who would be due, I believe, about $6 million. But in the run up to that, they may try and trade them, see if anybody's interested in taking those contracts for the lowest of level of prospects, just to see if they get some kind of return. And look, Heim is a less than 30-year-old catcher, switch hitter. There might be somebody who's willing to bite on that. The performance has obviously been very subpar the last few years, but there might be somebody who's willing to bite on that. And Adolis can contribute to a lineup defensively. I just don't know if he still has anything offensively. So maybe the Rangers get a bite there. But other than that, I think that most of the decisions are probably to hold on to guys. Most of the other contracts, like even guys like Josh Spores and Sam Haggerty, those are going to be minimal arbitration numbers. And both those guys, could pay significant dividends if they're healthy for 2026. The only caveat to any of that, Kevin, is, that as tight as it appears money is going to be, I don't know if the Rangers can afford to waste $500,000 of extra money. So that may be the one hang up there.
Yeah. Ugh. Not looking forward to this offseason, given all those parameters. All right.
No, it's going to be it's going to be a tough offseason. I will give Chris Young credit for this at the GM meetings. He basically said whatever the salary, whatever the payroll ends up being, there's no excuses. They need to go out and perform better. And that's the accountability that you want somebody to take. And I get it. Whatever the situation is, they've still got to go out there and perform. It can't be an excuse for a poor season. But I do think that the realities of contending with a contract, with a salary payroll that's going to drop to say 200 million or so, I think it's going to become very challenging unless you trade a big contract and get a good haul of younger players in return.
All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers. That's what I say.
Boy,
Until
you
they do
really didn't want to.
something-
You had nothing. You were uninterested.
You were the one who said, "Oh, we don't have to say anything about the Rangers," and I was the one who said, "Oh, we have to talk about them a little bit." And so then so Evan goes off on a soliloquy about the Rangers, of course, because he just likes to hear himself talk.
I'm best when I can hear myself talk, Kevin.
Yeah, I know that. All right,
let's talk about college football.
We were both in Athens on Saturday.
Well, you were in Athens. I was in Atlanta.
What? You didn't go to the game?
Didn't go to the game.
Wow.
Can I tell you a story?
What's the point of going to Atlanta if you're not going to go to the game?
So let me tell you a quick story.
Oh,
my best friend of 52 years, maybe 53, has a legitimate fear of heights, like a real fear of heights. I got the tickets and I looked at the tickets, and it was great to have tickets to the game, but they were in section 605, row UU, which is the absolute last row of the stadium. And when I told him this, I could hear across the phone line him shudder with fear. So what we did is the morning started with his son getting engaged, and I got to be there for that. So that was very nice. And then we had his whole family over and watched the game in his living room, where I had easy access to snacks and a bathroom, two important things for me. And then I could just revel in the fact that somehow Kirby Smart and his group is the best second half team that I have ever witnessed. So I didn't miss being in that atmosphere, but I'm curious what you thought about that game and what it told you about both Texas and Georgia.
I want to say, first of all, our press box seats were above UU, I think.
No, they were not.
Yes, they were. I'm telling you, you could barely tell who was down on the field. It was like ants running around on the field from that press box. So that was my first time between the hedges. It was a fun experience and all that great. All that was great. Although, as I noted in my newsletter this morning, if you watch that game, or after the game, the first thing that Steve Sarkisian said was, "Well, it was a good game for 3 quarters," and then I said, "Unfortunately, Georgia insisted on playing 4."
Yes.
So that was the difference. And you and I have talked about Kirby Smart even before this game about what he does in the second half. They're the best second half team in the nation, and maybe in years. They don't always play so great in the first half, but whatever happens, they figure it out at halftime, and then they come back out, and it's just like boom. And then this game wasn't really until the fourth quarter, although Georgia was in control the entire game. There was never really a point where I thought Texas was going to win the game.
I got nervous in the third quarter. I do admit I got nervous in the third quarter, but again, I mean, Georgia just finishes so strong, and I think that the Georgia fan base is often very critical of Mike Bobo, because every fan base has to have an offensive or defensive coordinator to pick on. I thought he made some great adjustments in the third quarter after Georgia kind of stalled out, and the offense got moving again. And listen, that onside kick, man, that's going to go down as a legendary call in Georgia history. That was the 2 fourth downs and then the onside kick. You could feel from 65 miles away in Atlanta the air just seep out of the Texas team.
Yeah, I asked Sarkisian after the game. I said, "Were you expecting them? Had you seen anything on film that suggests they might do something like that? And was that a backbreaker?" And he, coaches usually are very defensive about those kinds of questions because it makes it look like they didn't do their jobs. And he said, "Well, we did practice against that. We didn't execute it very well." And he didn't say it was a backbreaker, but he said, yes, that was a momentum changer in the game. And it was. I mean, and the thing about that onside kick was the way they did it. It was one of those situations where it didn't look like an onside kick until the ball was in the air, right? Because everybody was running forward just like it was a normal kick. And then, boom, that thing popped up in the air. It was perfect. It was perfect. And then the guy's running along. He just catches it, and he just fell down. he might have run for a touchdown if he kept running. I think he was just so excited about the fact that he caught it. He decided, I'm just going to stop here.
Was he able to advance that ball? I don't know if he was able to advance the ball.
I don't know. Well, I got to tell you, that's a great point, but I don't know why you wouldn't. If you didn't,
right.
If you don't touch if you don't touch the ground, what's to stop you?
If he had been able to advance, he would have scored. But yeah, it was perfectly executed, and it was a ballsy call on Kirby's part. And you could see on TV that Sark's reaction was, he got me good.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, ballsy. What a great name for a podcast.
That would be a great name for a podcast.
Yeah.
Super.
Well, it's funny because I was down by that time. I'm trying to remember exactly when I was on the sideline, but longer about that time I was on the sideline, and well, I guess it probably was after that, but it was clearly not going the right direction. It was about 5 minutes left in the game, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden this guy walks up right in front of me in a leather jacket and a cowboy hat. And he's standing there, and every once in a while he looks over towards the tunnel, and then there was a security guy, and then the security guy escorted Matthew McConaughey off the field. I think it was when Matthew leaves the field, it's like when Elvis leaves the building, right?
Yeah, when Matthew leaves the field, it's over.
Game over. Yeah, I listen. I didn't think that they had a shot to beat Georgia. I think, look, Texas is just not that good. It's a potentially good team. I mean, it's not a bad team, but look, their 2 wins on the road this year were against Kentucky and Mississippi State. And they had to.
One was in overtime, and one was having to have a 17-point fourth quarter comeback.
Yes, and so what does that tell you? I mean, they look, losing to Ohio State on the road, that wasn't bad. You lost by a touchdown first game of the season. That's not awful. But getting smashed by Georgia, that was a bad look. So now, before the game, we talked to Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, who's very most powerful man in college football, and about the CFP and what's going to happen. And I asked him, I said, do you think a 3-loss team can get in? And he said, I do. And then, of course, last year they thought a 3-loss team could get in because the SEC had 3 of them, and they made a case for Alabama, and Alabama did get in, and Alabama didn't deserve to be in last year. But it's a different situation this year. We've got 3 Big Ten teams that are going to get in, right? And from the looks of it, if Texas Tech wins the Big 12, that might be the only team that gets in. BYU might have a shot, but that's going to be it.
I think to your point, right? The shortcut here is there's no compelling argument for multiple teams from the other conferences, right? The Big 12 has the Big 10 has 3 teams. The SEC has at least 4, and then you've got the automatics. But there is going to be a 12th team that is either going to be a 4th Big 10 team or a 5th SEC team. I think.
I don't think it's going to be a Big 10 team. I think the other competition is probably going to come from the Big 12. If Tech loses, I have a hard time believing the CFP would deny a 10-win team.
If Tech loses the championship game, yes, I think there would be 2 teams in. I don't think there's any way that you get 2 teams in from the ACC this year, you did last year. And again, if it comes down to a 2-loss BYU team versus a 3-loss Texas or team, who do you like better?
Well, I just don't. You can't get 6 teams in. I mean, that's the thing, because Oklahoma is going to get in front. Right. First of all, you got the top 4 of the SEC, right? You got Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, and
A&M.
A&M. I can't believe I left out A&M. And so you got those 4. They're not going to lose. I mean, A&M might lose to Texas. I think that's certainly a possibility. It's a rivalry game. It's in Austin. That'll be a big game.
Clearly Texas's only route is you got to upset number 3 A&M.
Well, see, that's the thing to me. What the committee is going to ask is a win over an undefeated team and a team that's been good all year long, is that worth more than Oklahoma's wins over Tennessee and Alabama on the road? And that, because if you put them head to head, right, Texas beat Oklahoma, so that should count for something. Right. But Oklahoma probably will only have now that they finished with Missouri and LSU. That's no cakewalk. They've got a harder finish than anybody else. But if they win both those games, I really think the committee is going to take Oklahoma. I think, and we're going to find out tonight where they're ranked.
Well, I mean, obviously,
ranked.
right? A 3-loss team has a negative going against it, obviously, in the
Sure.
formula.
Yeah.
And, the fact that Texas's third loss, look, you lose to Ohio State and Georgia, and those are your only 2 losses, you're a playoff team.
Yeah.
I think you have a strong case. But that loss to Florida just, it sinks
ugly.
the season in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and they struggle to win a lot of games. So they struggle to get to this record. There's no question about that. So I think that there will be 5 teams. I don't think it's going to be Texas, even with a win over A&M. I think it'll be close. I think there'll be a lot of discussion in the room about how can you deny a team that did that, especially let's say it's a decisive win. If they were to beat the Aggies by 10 points or 15 points, something like that, I think that's going to make it really difficult for the committee to say no,
Right.
especially since they could always say, well, they beat Oklahoma head to head, right? And then they could say that, well, Texas had the more difficult schedule, even really than A&M did, because they had to go on the road against Ohio State. So that's going to be a great discussion. But if I'm ranking them right now, I'm going to say the 5th SEC team is going to be Oklahoma. And then, of course, that leaves. We should also ask the question in the group of 5, because I went out to North Texas this morning to talk to them out there. They're ranked for the first time in 66 years. So that's big news in Denton. We'll see what the CFP thinks of them, because as we're taping this, it's before those rankings come out Tuesday night. I think they've got a good shot. Now, of course, they've got that 63-36 loss to South Florida. But South Florida has also stumbled here a little bit late. So they're in the running for that group of 5 bid. That would be fun if they could get in. They certainly have a lot going for them. They got a quarterback who's leading the most prolific offense in the country. They lead the nation in turnover margin. And they got a freshman running back who's leading the nation in touchdowns with 19. So there's a lot to be said for them as well. SMU's chances are nearly nil here. They got to have a lot of things happen for them to even get in the ACC title game.
Listen, when I went back and looked today with our staff and saw that Virginia Tech has got to beat Virginia for SMU, it is one of the things to happen. I'm not sure Pitt beats Georgia Tech this week, and I'm almost certain there's no way Virginia Tech beats Virginia. So, yeah, I don't think SMU makes it to the championship game, and they're playing as good as any ACC team is right now. So that's unfortunate. And listen, on the Texas and Oklahoma thing, I think the great thing about this is how good of an asset to add to the Oklahoma-Texas rivalry will it be that argument, that somebody's going to lose that argument between those two.
When it comes down to that you're right. That's a great point for the rivalry.
That's going to be another great chapter. Now, Kevin, we have not talked about, and I was texting you in the middle of all this, right? That A&M was down 30-3 and somehow won that game.
Yeah, that's an unbelievable game by them. That's one of those things, and I wrote about this in my follow, or I guess it was in my Best in Texas rankings, is that somehow they beat South Carolina. And if that game had been, if you'd flopped those halves, if it was South Carolina that had the second half and A&M had the first half that was dominant, and it was the same result, but if you flopped the halves of dominance there, people would say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that A&M just hung on for that win over South Carolina. Boy, look how they came back. And yet the fact that it's always what you do last that matters the most. The fact that they were able to come back and win like that, it made them look better. If they had beaten South Carolina by 20, nobody'd be talking about it. They'd just be saying, well, shoot, what the heck? South Carolina, they're no good. They've had a terrible season. Lenore Sellers, it's been one of the biggest disappointments in all of college football. And so you just write it off as nothing. But because they came back from a 27-point deficit and win by 1, it was like, oh my gosh, what a great team. How much guts and heart and determination they have. Yeah, and that's exactly right. They did.
Hey, did you catch the SEC shorts bit from this week?
I did not see it.
So battered Aggie syndrome came into the room and had the old Aggie in tears. But on the other end of the house that they shared, the Gamecock fan was getting very cocky, and apparently the ghost of South Carolina is premature cockiness, and it's a guy with a mullet, and he came into the room and he kind of beat down the battered Aggie syndrome. You got to watch it to actually appreciate it, but
Yeah, that wasn't very good, that description. I don't know.
We got to have that group of people on. I just think it makes my week every week to watch what their interpretation of the SEC is.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They do a great job. Well, I tell you, it's been another great SEC season and another great season in college football. It's coming to a close, or at least the regular season is about to come to a close. And we've had all kinds of stuff happen. And I think we can say now, last year we just thought, well, it's just a great year. And it was a lot of fun, and we'll see what happens. Well, it was kind of more or less the same thing this year. You don't get it as much from the Big Ten because, frankly, it's so top heavy, right? You just got, Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State, and that's
well,
it.
Usually Michigan, but not usually Indiana. Right. But this is the golden age of Indiana football, and nobody's happier than Babe Laufenberg.
Yes, that's right, Mr. Indiana. You know why he transferred to Indiana, don't you?
Because he loved Bobby Knight.
Because the new young quarterback at Stanford was a guy named John Elway.
Oh, so he didn't think he could beat. I don't want a guy that doesn't think he can beat John Elway out.
Yeah, right. So anyway, yeah, it's just, look, for everything that's gone wrong in college football and all the craziness that's going on in college football, the product on the field is entertaining as ever. I don't know if the level of play is as good. I don't know if the best teams are as good as they used to be, but
They're not.
know. I don't think they are either. But there are more really good teams than there used to be.
They're not. Look, there's many things, as you said, as many things are wrong with college football and college sports these days. The product on the field in the SEC, and I speak specifically about the SEC here, because I think the number of teams that are good to elite is bigger than any other conference. Makes it's the most enjoyable football product that I watch any time of year. I enjoy it more than watching the NFL. It's fun, and there's a level of history and rivalry and dominance, but there's also more parity than there's ever been. See Vanderbilt, I mean, there's just great stories from year to year in college football, and particularly in the SEC. And I hate being an SEC snob, but it is a fun product to watch, man. It really is.
Well, one of the things I have to do and have to remember to do every week is I for our fellow Hearst paper, the Houston Chronicle, I rank the SEC every week, every Saturday night. And Kurt Bowles, my pal from the Chronicle, a longtime Austin American Statesman sports writer before he switched over to the Chronicle a couple years ago, was saying, who are you picking last in the SEC? And I said, well, I pick Arkansas. And he goes, have you looked at the scores of their games and how close they all were? And I said, yeah, I know. I said, it's as hard to pick the bottom of the SEC as it is the top. At least at the top, it's really Georgia is. I mean, A&M, I pick A&M first every week. They're undefeated. They deserve to be number one.
Yep.
A&M, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss. That's pretty easy, those four, right?
Yep.
And then you get in the middle, and it's okay. I can kind of sort this out. Then you get towards the bottom, and it's like, all these teams are pretty good. That there's nobody in there that's just like, oh, that's an automatic W.
Yeah, I mean, Mississippi State's played some good teams very close this year. Kentucky played Texas close. Arkansas has played some close games. But yeah, for me, that's the bottom of the league right now. Obviously, Florida is there. I don't think that's going to be a long-term stay for Florida. I still think when all this is said and done, Lane Kiffin is going to put his visor on in Gainesville, and you're going to see a resurgence of Florida football, and I am dreading that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to close out on that because we got to go. But I was having that discussion with Joe Hoyt before this started. Yes, it just seems too natural for him to go there, and as you have put it, to become Steve Spurrier's heir at Florida and restore Florida to its prominence in the SEC. But on the flip side of that, I could sure see Lane Kiffin saying that, what, this is the first time I've ever been happy as a head coach is there in Oxford. And you're coaching at a school where, yes, it it does not have the resources that Florida has. And it's not a great, there's not a lot of recruits out of Mississippi. They don't have as much money. All of those things are true. But if you win big at Ole Miss, they're going to make statues of you there. I mean, that is going to be because they've never won a national title. So that could be a place where you'd be revered forever and you have whatever you wanted. Now, I don't think that necessarily that Lane Kiffin is that kind of guy, and that's what he wants. He seems like a guy who always wants to move on. It's just a question of whether is he really happy there now? And the question to me, too, is that how long can Florida wait to name a head coach? If Lane Kiffin's winning in the playoffs, they're going to be playing until the middle of January. So this will be very interesting to see how that all turns out. All right, that's going to do it for this week's podcast. We appreciate you taking the time. We'll be back next week, and we'll find out a little bit more about the Cowboys and how they did against the Eagles. Be sure to come back and tune in for that. And we'll also be a little closer here to getting toward the biggest week of the year, or at least in college football around here, when you have Texas and A&M playing next week on the day after Thanksgiving. And it means a lot to both of those programs, and we'll see how that turns out. I'll be down there for that one. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.